is 9/11 Freefall.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of 9/11 Freefall. I am your host, Andy Steele. I'm riding solo tonight, no guests this evening. I'm going to take advantage of this time to go over the latest news and headlines with you from ae911truth.org. There's a bunch of headlines that have come and gone over the past several months that I have not had time to focus on. It's a good time to do that and opine on them. And just a few minutes before I started recording tonight, I noticed that this show is airing on the 5th of November. Remember, the 5th of November. It's just something that you saw in a movie. Nobody in this country cared about Guy Fawkes Day, that's what the 5th of November is, until that movie came out, V for Vendetta, back in 2005. Suddenly people took note of it. They took that as a symbol of rebellion, because of course Guy Fawkes Day is based off of the person Guy Fawkes, who was caught trying to blow up Parliament and the King during a meeting in which both of those houses of government at the time were present. And of course it was unsuccessful. He ended up paying the ultimate price for his actions. And indeed, we've seen it over the years. People have mimicked what they saw in that movie. You see the Guy Fawkes mask being worn at public protests like Occupy Wall Street. You see groups that use that as their symbol. Obviously, Guy Fawkes, I can't endorse what he did. They call him the first terrorist. And indeed, that is a terrorist action to try to blow up Parliament and the head of state. That is not the way to go, folks, and that is why I love working with architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, working with the wider 9/11 Truth movement, because they're very polite, very knowledgeable, and we use our knowledge, use our brains to bring our voices to as many people as possible, talk about the scientific evidence, point to Building 7 and say, hey, that can't happen unless you have preset explosives. So I always worry when I see people picking up on some trend or when I see them mimicking something they saw in a movie. And that's all it is, folks. The 5th of November is just something you saw in a movie. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm not saying a holiday didn't exist before that movie came out, but that is nothing to be celebrating. A guy, using those kinds of methods to try to bring about change. Because when you try to bring about change in that kind of way, what comes out of it is not something that you want to live under most times. All right, it's like trying to conjure up some kind of demon or something like that. I know that that's not realistic, but you see that in horror movies. People try to conjure something thinking that they're going to get a reward, and it ends up coming back on them. Well, that happens in a society when change is attempted to be initiated through those measures. So here on 9/11 Freefall, we don't look at the 5th of November as anything other than a date on the calendar. That's right.
Gandhi, Dr. King, dramatized and defined the technique of nonviolence, and yet he also said that the only alternative to fear is violence, and that if that were the alternative, he would have to choose violence. Do you subscribe to that judgment of Gandhi, or would you disavow violence under any conditions?
Well, I think I would have to somewhat interpret Gandhi at this point. I don't think he was setting forth violence as an alternative. I think he was emphasizing, or rather trying to refute an all too prevalent fallacy, and that is that the persons who use the method of nonviolence are actually the weak persons, persons who don't have the weapons of violence, persons who are afraid. And I think that is what Gandhi was attempting to refute. Now, in that instance, I would agree with Gandhi that if the only alternative to violence, to fear, is violence and vice versa, then I would say fight. But it isn't the only alternative. And that is one point that Gandhi was trying to bring out. It seems to me that there are three ways that oppressed people can deal with their oppression.
What are they, Dr. King?
Well, one is to rise up in open violence, in physical violence. And some persons have used that method, persons who have been oppressed. But I think the danger of that method is its futility. I feel that violence creates many more social problems than it solves.
May I interrupt you there, Dr. King? There are today certainly people who are forced to endure a kind of injustice that neither you nor even Gandhi in his time had ever seen. For example, would you regard the martyrs of Hungary's rebellion a year ago as misguided men and having used violence?
I admire freedom fighters wherever they are, but I still believe that nonviolence is the strongest approach. I think that would apply to the Hungarian situation also. I don't think it's limited to a particular locality. I think it should apply in every situation in the world where individuals seek to break loose from the bondage of colonialism or from some totalitarian regime or from the system which we confront in America.
You truly believe, then, that nonviolence is the sole, the universal answer to injustice and oppression?
Very definitely.
Lasting answer.
Very definitely. I feel that nonviolence, organized nonviolent resistance is the most powerful weapon that oppressed people can use in breaking loose from the bondage of oppression. Now, the other method that one might use is that of resignation or acquiescence. But I think that is just as bad as violence, because non-cooperation with evil is as much a moral obligation as is cooperation with good.
You make a difference, a distinction between passive resistance and nonviolent resistance, is that it?
Well, I think that can be something of a semantical problem. If passive resistance means just passively accepting violence or injustice, if it means cowardice and stagnant passivity, then there is a difference, because nonviolent resistance does resist. It is dynamically active. It is passive physically, but it is strongly active spiritually.
In a sense, would you regard it as moving into the Christian philosophy, too? You mean the doctrine of turn the other cheek to regard as positive rather than passive?
I think it is positive. I think very definitely, if it is used properly and accepted with the proper attitude, it is a very strong method. It is a method of the strong man, not the weak man.
So, moving forward, I just wanted to bring attention to a little bit of political news. And obviously, this is not a political show. This is a show that highlights scientific evidence related to 9/11. But I had John O'Malley on this show several times in the past. He is our congressional outreach person at AE 9/11 Truth, and he does outreach at various political events. One event that he was at CPAC last year, I believe it was, and he talked about the lack of support for Jeb Bush at that conference. Smallest amount of volunteers of any candidate Jeb Bush had. He got the least amount of votes in the straw poll, I believe. However, when John was questioned by one of the corporate media networks, I think it was CNN, all they could ask him about was Jeb Bush, as if Jeb Bush was the front runner. But now, Jeb Bush, I guess, is trailing somewhere in the back end of the race here. I don't know if he's dead last, if he's above a few other people, but he is not doing as well as he hoped. And I'd like to think that 9/11 Truth has played a part in that. Obviously, there's a lot of reasons people did not like the Bush family, did not like his brother during his reign as president. But 9/11 Truth has played a large part in shining a light on some of the stuff that went on during his brother's administration. And I think people are sick of the same old, same old. They want to envision a future in which we can have transparency, where we can have openness in government, where we can have a new investigation into 9/11. And I guess that's why I pay attention to the Jeb Bush campaign, because with Jeb Bush coming into power, if he did, and became the president, I think it would be a lot more difficult to get a new 9/11 investigation. Not saying that I believe that any other candidate up there would do it either, but that would sort of cement it if Jeb Bush was there, because any kind of cover-ups in 9/11 would obviously bring into question his brother and what he did as he oversaw those cover-ups, whether they happened with his knowledge or didn't. It would be very difficult to get a new investigation under that. So that is why I don't endorse a Jeb Bush presidency, among many other reasons. And I think that's the most politically correct way that I can say that. But we got to keep in mind, too, just like I said last week, that no politician is going to save us unless we hold their feet to the fire. So even if you like another candidate, let's say it's Donald Trump, let's say it's Rand Paul, and that person somehow got the presidency, you can't just throw up your hands and say, job well done, we've accomplished our mission, because they're not going to do anything unless you show some kind of resistance. And of course, I'm not talking about violence, as my diatribe at the beginning of this show should alert everyone. But I am talking about creating pressure, protests, writing letters, speaking out in whatever media will give you attention. Because that's the way to go about it, folks. That's how change always happens. And yes, I do believe that we can talk them into surrender. I do believe that if we just don't stop talking, we keep on reminding everybody in the general public, in the corporate media, including our politicians, that jet fuel can't melt steel and that 105 feet of free fall is impossible unless you have preset explosives helping it along, then this will be inserted into people's general knowledge pool. And even if they don't ever acknowledge what happened on 9/11, what really happened with those three buildings, you can bet your bottom dollar that moving forward, they will keep this in the back of their minds, and this will influence the future. So it's the three-dimensional effect of our activism, talking about this issue, that we are seeing, and I believe, honestly, I think we are seeing the fruits of it start to sprout now in this current political race. So keep it up, keep working, keep pushing. Okay, I'm going to go to my first article here from AE911truth.org. Title of it is NCSEA Summit in Las Vegas, 25 new structural engineer petition signers. And if you remember, I had Richard Gage and Stephen Dusterwald on the program like a month or so ago to talk about this, talking about it in the future tense. Well, they are back. And now again, we've got new structural engineers on the petition thanks to their effort. They're in Vegas. So what happened in Vegas didn't stay in Vegas. It came out into the AE911 Truth petition. The article begins, well, we made it. Our fiercely dedicated AE911 Truth supporters raised the necessary funds to send structural engineer Stephen Dusterwald and architect Richard Gage to the 400-strong NCSEA Structural Engineering Summit in Las Vegas earlier this month. And once there, we made quite a stir. Thanks to our backers, we hosted a first-class exhibit booth that attracted many curious convention-goers. Throughout the 2 days we participated in this 3-day event, more than 100 structural engineers saw the evidence we presented demonstrating the controlled demolition of World Trade Center Building 7. Of those we engaged in conversation, 25 of them signed our petition demanding a new investigation. How do we get such a high percentage to stop by our booth and sign on the dotted line? As attendees walked past, we asked, did you know a third tower came down on 9/11? Hearing that question more than 14 years after the tragic event had become a dim, distant memory in their minds, they generally stopped dead in their tracks and with a puzzled look asked, what? So that's a good way to get their attention, folks, because a lot of people don't know about that third tower. They just think of the two. Yeah, we responded, pointing to a looping video on our TV monitor. Look at Building 7. How is it coming down? Did the fire cause it to fall that way? Or is that a controlled demolition? Most of them replied matter-of-factly, controlled demolition. Our next line, NIST says normal office fires. But fires never brought down a steel frame skyscraper, and no plane hit this building. Would you like to join the 2,350 architects and engineers who are calling for a new independent investigation? So that was the approach, and that's the best way to go about it, because when people watch Building 7 coming down, the symmetry, the sudden onset of collapse, the 7-second destruction that is impossible unless you have preset explosives. Of course, something just snaps in their mind, and they realize that it is a controlled demolition. Even before you tell them anything about it being 9/11, even if you tell them this is just a regular building having nothing to do with any catalyzing events in our history, they immediately think it's controlled demolition. Remember Danny Jowenko saying that when he was showed that. He was a controlled demolitions expert from Europe, saying this is controlled demolition. So right there, instinctively, they know. It's only after they find out about the controversy does the mass peer pressure set in. The article goes on, when the event was coming to a close, Dusterwald reflected on the success of the outreach effort. We're getting some good responses from people who are willing to look at the evidence. Of course, there are a few who don't want to hear about it and get a bit hostile. When you grab people walking by, you might think they'd be annoyed that they're being roped in for a speech or something, but a lot of them are very interested. When they see the videos on our 2 screens running the collapse of Building 7 over and over every 10 seconds, and they hear us ask if they think a fire could bring the building down, they can't help but give their honest opinion. No, that looks like a controlled demolition. It's really rewarding to find all these hard-nosed structural engineers opening their minds, evaluating the evidence, taking our literature, and listening to our explanations. All right, and then it continues. It's just such an obvious video. You can see the building coming apart a little bit as it's coming down, but basically it just stays together all the way to the ground until it's just a pile of rubble. So they can't believe that anybody would come to the conclusion of destruction by fire. And yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about just a minute ago. Anybody with just at least 2 functioning brain cells and an internet connection, as one C-SPAN caller was famously quoted as saying, can tell you that this was a controlled demolition. This is a smoking gun. This is a signal that we need to have a new investigation. And that is all that the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth are asking for. Simply a new investigation into the biggest mass murder in U.S. history, which Building 7 is a part of. Even if they claim nobody died in World Trade Center 7, it's still associated with the crime. And as NIST has admitted, the minor damage on the southwest corner of the building that it sustained from the fall of Tower 1 had absolutely nothing to do with the initiation of collapse on the northeast side. All right, that initiation of collapse was supposedly because of a few thermally expanding beams that were framing into a girder, pushing it off of its seat. So they've given us this weak explanation that is easy to debunk, that is just debunked by the sheer simplicity of it. Because even a failure in one column cannot cause the entire structure to come down that fast, that swift, that symmetrically, like we saw with that building on that day. So this article continues just with Dusterwald's quote, "The petition signing rate is remarkably high, I think, given how skeptical and scientific these people are. The ones who don't sign immediately are saying, 'Let me think about it.' Also, they're usually on their way to somewhere when they come by here, so we don't have much time with them. One type of visitor stops for a few minutes and picks up some literature. Then there's another type of visitor who stays for 10 minutes and talks with us in detail. I see hardly anybody refusing the DVDs or literature. It seems like everybody will at least take our Beyond Misinformation booklet or a copy of our 15-minute DVD of Ed Asner saying, 'Did you know that the third tower came down on 9/11? Or a 3-page fold-out brochure, Why Architects and Engineers Should Support a New Investigation, into which we put the flyer for our film screening presentation on Saturday at the Sahara Library.'" So no effort is wasted. I mean, if you get some brochures from ae911truth.org and decide to go stand out in front of someplace, be it a government building, be it a business, as long as you're allowed to be there, if you have permission from the business to do it, or if you're just out in a park or something, all right, you are reaching people. I came across a YouTube video that was purposely misfiled so that somebody like me would come across it. Now, here I am talking to you about 9/11 every single week, dealing with the issue of 9/11 and the controlled demolition evidence every single day. So you have no idea what kind of lives you can change by simple actions, handing somebody that brochure, getting somebody that DVD, getting them a copy of Beyond Misinformation, which is short enough to be read in a quick amount of time, but long enough to be thorough and go into the evidence in detail. All right, that is a tool. That is a weapon in this war. This is the real war, not violence and shooting and destroying the society in which you live. The November 5thers would want you to have, the people who support that, but with your words, with your knowledge, by having the real revolution in people's minds. I've talked about this before on the show. People always talk about revolutions. They envision wars and cannon fire and all of these things and violence, and it's become so ingrained, the idea of revolution with violence, that people think it's all one and the same. But I was listening to a course taught by a professor at Yale University on the American Revolution, and she made a very clear distinction. Revolution is the change in people's thoughts, the change in the way people do things. That's where the real revolution is. Now, there was a war that followed as a result of the change that the people wanted, but the war itself was not the revolution. The war was the change in the public consciousness. So actually, we are fighting a revolution right now, all right, with what we're doing, what I'm doing with this show, what AE 9/11 Truth does every single day with all of its outreach activities. We are fighting a revolution, not a violent one, a peaceful one, the way revolutions should be fought, by just constantly talking and constantly getting this information to as many people as we can, VIPs or ordinary folk, who also then carry that torch to the next checkpoint or the next pair of eyes that they want to read the information. So we're all in this, and the great thing about this effort is that you do it whenever you want to do it. You know, if you got a little bit of time here and there, you just take it to forward a copy of the booklet to somebody, or forward maybe a YouTube video, or just call up someone. That is like so critical. Get somebody on the phone, have a conversation, and say, hey, I know you're an architect. I just read a booklet from a group of architects and engineers, and I want to get your opinion on it. And just forward it to them that way. That is the simplest way. You don't even have to get into all the evidence or defend it. You just ask them if they're willing to read the booklet and send it to them, and ask them for their clear, honest opinion on it. And tell them to write to me. I would love to hear critiques of the Beyond Misinformation booklet. You can send it to Ace Steele at ae911truth.org, and I will read it. If an architect has a critique or something that they want to raise about the book, I will forward it to the greater organization. Right? But that is so simple. And right there, you're not putting yourself in a position to have to be as detailed in your knowledge as Richard Gage is. You're simply saying, hey, can you read this and give AE 9/11 Truth your opinion of it? There you go. Bam. You can even do that with one of the PDF versions. Those can be duplicated a zillion times and sent out to zillions of different people. Going on with this article, this is still Stephen Dusterwold's quote. Some people just take the petition with them, say, I don't sign anything on the spot, which is a sensible viewpoint. They take the petition with them, read it when they have time, then decide to sign it and drop it by our booth later on. I'm amazed at how many others will sign it right as we're talking to them. They look at the video, agree that it looks like a controlled demolition, see that all we're asking for is another investigation, realize that that's not too much to ask, and sign on the spot. Sure, it costs money to be here, but it's worth it, because that's the only way we can get our message out there to the profession. You've got to spend the money to get results. And that's another way that you can help fight in the revolution, is that you can become a member at AE 9/11 Truth. You can buy the merchandise. You can donate. Because this stuff, reaching out to all these architects and engineers, that costs money. That we need to send people and buy all of that fancy display stuff that catches people's eyes, print the pamphlets that get handed out to them. So even if you don't have time to do anything else, if you don't have time to be an activist, you can still donate, and your dollars will go a long way to be stretched to fight in this important war. We have found that we can't push these engineers too far. We generally stick with Building 7 because that's enough for them to handle. We gauge their responses, and we see that most of them just aren't ready to move on, especially when they tell us that everybody knows how the Twin Towers came down. We don't want to challenge their basic assumptions before they're ready to reconsider them. To do that would risk setting their world on fire. So this article continues. It's a rather long article, but it is available at ae911truth.org for you to look at. And it just shows the day-to-day stuff that is happening. The small gains, the small things done well every day that is ultimately going to win for us in the end. So kudos to Richard Gage and Stephen Dusterwald for their actions there. I got this other article, and it is from ae911truth.org. It's written by Craig McKee. It says, Social Media and 9/11 Truth, a perfect marriage. Reaching a lot of people at the least expense is a challenge every nonprofit organization faces. But when that nonprofit dares to question institutions that defend the status quo, like governments and the mainstream media, the challenges are multiplied. This is why architects and engineers from 9/11 Truth have secured a professional advice about social media, notably Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, in order to expand its ability to reach potential supporters and to disseminate the irrefutable scientific evidence that World Trade Center Towers 1, 2, and 7 were brought down in controlled demolitions on September 11th, 2001. It is absolutely amazing what a force social media is, too. Folks, I was there in the MySpace days. Back, does everybody remember MySpace? That was the engine through which I got a lot of information out to people when I was first waking up, when I was first coming across this information. I remember that, and it was so great because you could add as many friends as you wanted. I had something like 20,000 friends on my page that I was sending out bulletins to every single night. Tons of them. Not just about 9/11, but other issues too. And the great thing was that when you send out a bulletin to your friends on MySpace, everybody saw it. It was right there. It went to every single friend. I don't think that's the case so much now with Facebook. I think that only a limited number of your quote-unquote friends can see what you post, if you have a lot of them. Also, Facebook gives you a 5,000 friend limit. Like I said, MySpace had no limits. You could get as many friends as you wanted. And what happened on MySpace, because when I first started out, I thought I was going to be a lone wolf out in the wilderness talking about 9/11, 9/11 Truth, but I came across another person doing the same thing, and then I added some of his friends, and what would happen here is that people would post bulletins, and then other people who got those bulletins would repost them, and that's how news circulated fast. And what you could do, kind of like an email thread where you can see who had the emails before, who had sent emails and participated in the conversation before, you could see who had posted the bulletin before the version of it you were reading. So if it was like reposted a bunch of times, you could see who had posted that in the previous postings earlier in the night. And so what you would do is you would go to those MySpace people because they had clickable links to their profiles, and then you could add them. So it became like a snowball effect. This is how so many people in 9/11 Truth got together and were able to form this community online and have news spread fast. So I noticed after a while, however, they changed it. They made it was impossible to have clickable links to each person's MySpace profile. But that didn't deter people, because what they would do is post their MySpace URLs into their browsers and still add them. And I don't have the entire history chronicled of what happened to MySpace, but I did notice that they did make it harder and harder for us online activists and bloggers to get our information out. Ultimately, Rupert Murdoch's outfit ended up buying MySpace, and they destroyed it. It was a terrible shell of its former self by the end. They focused on music or something, and it just became not even a social network. And so everybody migrated over to Facebook, but Facebook is limited, and it doesn't allow you to randomly add people, because that's what I used to do. I used to randomly add people on MySpace and get the news of 9/11 out to them that way. I think they wanted to tone that down. Who knows? That's speculation. But that is indeed what happened. This article goes on, the numbers tell us that the effort is going well. AE 9/11 Truth's Facebook page, created in 2009, recently passed 250,000 likes, about 125,000 of those coming in the last year alone. The rapid growth of these numbers has a lot to do with the increasing importance the group has placed on social media. According to the man at the helm of this effort, social media and marketing director Jeff Long. Nonprofits don't realize what a powerful tool they have, Long asserts, adding that a poorly chosen Twitter or Facebook post can do great damage to the reputation of an organization. You remember Jeff Long was on the program a couple of times talking about Operation Mockingbird, talking about when some news article attacked this show after Carl Sagan's son came out, or Jeremy Sagan came out and said that he agrees with us about 9/11 and the controlled demolition evidence. Long says it is essential that AE 9/11 Truth produce a professional-looking page with engaging graphics and compelling text, all offering valuable information about the group and about the evidence it presents. We have to look as good as the organizations we are up against, like NIST. He says, we're fighting the perception of the conspiracy theory tag. Facebook offers AE 9/11 Truth an opportunity to post fresh updates on what the group is doing, as well as other information that may go a bit beyond the evidence for controlled demolition of the towers. To attract more people, we have to offer more content, and I think people appreciate a wider context of information, Long contends. And see, this is why we need our supporters, because and I face this challenge every week, finding new ways to talk about the controlled demolition evidence. Because, the controlled demolition evidence is the evidence. How many times, if you were talking about the O.J. Simpson case, could you talk about the bloody glove? I mean, it's there, it was found, and it's over, right? So you got to find new ways to keep it exciting, to keep it interesting to people. And for this, we need our supporters. We need people going out and doing things to spread the evidence and getting it documented, either a picture or a video. Go out to your city council and do a speech before your city council. Do the 3-minute speech written by architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. Send it to me. We'll put it up on Facebook. Go out with an AE 9/11 Truth sign or a Rethink 9/11 sign, and find some interesting structure in your community. It could be a George Washington statue. It could be the town's biggest ball of cheese. I don't know. But whatever it is, something interesting. Put the Rethink 9/11 sign in front of it. Send a picture, and we can put it up on the Facebook page. We need help. We want to show the world what our supporters are doing, what they are up to, how they are getting the word out to as many people as possible. All right? You guys are the truth vigilantes. It is up to you. The future is looking to you, counting on you to expose the real myths of 9/11 and go confront congressmen out at public venues, town halls. Ask them a question about Building 7. About the science, like we did on C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Get a video of it and send it. We'll put it up. We need that kind of excitement. We need that kind of enthusiasm. And I know that this audience has that. So, that's what I witnessed back in 2008 when I was involved with 9/11 Truth then. We need to get that back. Again, there is no wrong answer when it comes to this kind of stuff, because nobody's ever written a manual for us on how to fight against a cover-up like this. So maybe you have good ideas. Maybe if you do something, a million other people will emulate it. You never know. In rare cases, AE 9/11 Truth will go beyond its primary mandate, investigating the destruction of the 3 World Trade Center towers on its website, notably with a very popular series of articles by Francis Schuer that deals with why people resist learning about the clear evidence that the 9/11 official story cannot be true. In addition to offering fans a relief valve to vent about the 9/11 Truth effort, social media gets information to people more quickly than traditional models, and the use of images is well suited to this, says Long. The human brain processes image 60,000 times faster than text, he explains. Statistics show that people scrolling through Twitter posts will stop on an image. We treat memes as billboards. And now that's something, and you can probably tell when you listen to Jeff on this show in previous episodes. He is a very smart guy. He's almost like a computer. He just knows these statistics right off the top of his head, and a very intelligent person. I love having him on. Plus, he has no problem filling the hour, too. So that is a very good asset, a good way to make many appearances on this show, because I love it when the guests talk. Besides keeping the public updated about AE 9/11 Truth specifically and 9/11 Truth in general, the key purpose of its Facebook page is to direct people to the main website where they can sign up for email updates on the organization's activities and initiatives, sign the petition for a new investigation, take action, donate, and browse the online store. Long notes that the database of email addresses can be used to send targeted messages notifying followers about upcoming events or actions in their city or region. The way Long sees it, social media dovetails with AE 9/11 Truth's multifaceted ways of reaching people, ways that include articles and FAQs on the website, documentaries available on its YouTube channel and as DVDs, publicity campaigns like Rethink 9/11, presentations, letter writing campaigns, and outreach utilizing comprehensive scientific publications to members of the academic and political communities. And it ends with a quote from Jeff. I'd like to think of us as a whistleblower site, and we're blowing that whistle hard. Couldn't say it better myself. So you need to be helping us out, get us content, make stuff happen. Spread the information that is on the Facebook page for AE 9/11 Truth. If you see something posted, share it, like it, and do whatever you can. All right, and finally I got this article here. It is written by Simon Faulkner and Chris Sarnes, rebutting a challenge to our 6-part series on World Trade Center 7. The question of, is AE 9/11 Truth trying to hide these World Trade Center 7 photos? Uh-oh, are we hiding photos? Well, let's explore. As readers will recall, the second article in our 6-part series on World Trade Center 7 debunked a myth that the National Institute of Standards and Technology had propagated 10 years ago through Popular Mechanics' ironically named article debunking 9/11 myths. According to this myth, a huge gouge, presumably caused by flying debris from the North Tower, had scooped out the bottom 10 stories of the center of the south face of World Trade Center 7. I guess they have a picture there. Our article, published last December, proved that NIST never had any evidence for this gouge. What's more, it revealed that NIST had acknowledged as much in its 2008 final report on World Trade Center 7 by being strangely silent on the subject of the gouge, in marked contrast to the hoopla NIST had stirred up about the phantom gouge in 2005's Popular Mechanics piece, titled Part 1, NIST and Popular Mechanics Fabricate Myth about World Trade Center 7 Scooped Out 10 Stories. Our article exposed the unprofessional and unethical practices on the part of NIST that had created this myth in the first place. So this was a debunked early theory put out by NIST, by the debunkers in the early stages of trying to explain what happened to World Trade Center 7. It's been totally abandoned now, but we're still talking about it. Why are we still talking about it? Well, the article says, since then, some of our readers, have informed us that we've been accused by a few so-called 9/11 truth debunkers on a variety of internet forums of lying about the absence of the gouge. In short, it seems that the center of the south side gouge myth still lingers in cyberspace, despite the originator of the myth, NIST, having already given it up. According to these online authors, AE 9/11 Truth is hiding certain photos that prove the existence of that supposedly scooped out section on the south face. And they show the pictures here. I don't see a gouge. Scrolling down, such an allegation is ridiculous for several reasons. Number one, these finger pointers are in effect accusing our nemesis, NIST, of the exact same cover-up. Our December article showed a graphic of the gouge that Popular Mechanics talked about in its infamous 2005 article and compared it to another graphic from NIST's 2008 report. This comparison made it obvious that the precisely identified gouge in the first report was missing in the final paper. In other words, NIST was issuing a mea culpa without admitting it. And, I think I might play this later on in the show if I have time. But David Coburn, who was supposed to be in some kind of editorial position on that book, claimed that he saw a picture of the gouge, which was later abandoned by NIST. So he was outright lying in that. This was an interview on the Charles Goyette show, and I don't think I've ever played that here on this program, and maybe I do my listeners a disservice by not playing it. But David Coburn made an absolute fool of himself in that interview. I think it's worth sharing with you. But this article continues, the dark band NIST referred to is actually not proof of a gouge, let alone the gouge. Though NIST's final report did review that alleged photographic proof of the gouge, it did not conclude that the dark band proved damage to World Trade Center 7's steel frame. Instead, it simply noted that some missing granite panels may have been the reason for the dark band in the photos, meaning that any damage done to the exterior could have been limited to a superficial blow from the North Tower debris to the granite cladding. There is no evidence of damage to the steel frame. Number 3, Popular Mechanics' myth about the notorious gouge would have remained debunked even if NIST had depicted that the dark band represented a gouge. That's because the dark band being referred to appeared on the upper left side of the south face, whereas the mythical gouge was supposedly a scooped-out section of the bottom 10 floors of the center of the south face. Thus, a dark band gouge, if confirmed, would have been another gouge in a completely different location, while the claim of the scooped-out gouge would have stayed dead and buried, a thoroughly debunked myth. In other words, NIST photos of the dark band were not relevant to the discussion in our December article and are still not relevant. So these alleged debunkers can't even get their facts straight, can't even get it together enough, put together this information. In sum, we agree with NIST that the gouge celebrated by the 2005 Popular Mechanics article did not exist. If loyal readers of Popular Mechanics want to pinpoint just who is spreading disinformation, we suggest they listen to a claim made by the magazine's researcher editor David Coburn in a 2006 radio interview where he told Charles Goyette that he had seen photos of the mythical gouge. Did the City of New York Police Department show Coburn fake photos, or are the claims made by Popular Mechanics not trustworthy? You have eyes. You decide. And I think I might just go ahead and play that for you.
On the line with us is Davin Coburn in New York City. He is with Popular Mechanics magazine. Popular Mechanics has expanded on a series of articles they've had about the 9/11 and what they call the 9/11 myths. They have expanded it into a book. The book is called Debunking 9/11 Myths, Why Conspiracy Theories Can't Stand Up to the Facts. The foreword to 9/11 Myths, by the way, is by our senior snowy-haired senator from Arizona, Senator John McCain. And Davin, thanks very much for being on our show this morning.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yeah. I'm going to let callers and listeners who are particularly concerned with this have at you on the show. I'll give the phone number to them. 602-277-KFNX is the phone number, 602-277-5369. First of all, what is your job at Popular Mechanics, and why are you speaking with me?
Sure, I'm the research editor here at the magazine. I was an original reporter on the magazine piece in the March 2005 issue, and then my role for this book was largely to fact-check the material in it.
All right.
To make sure that everything there was accurate.
All right, that sounds good to me. Now, I think I think of it from the perspective of being a magazine editor. It's a perfectly good subject. It's a really juicy, it's a really delicious subject. But there are those who go, what the hell's Popular Mechanics know about it? Why did they decide to make this a cause célèbre?
Sure. Well, the reason that we went after it is that being here in New York, we'd heard all sorts of rumors. We'd heard various theories and, people questioning what happened on September 11th. And we thought, if there's any truth to these rumors, if there is information that hasn't been given to the public, if there are things that need to be looked into, that we were the perfect people to do that with our history in structural engineering and our examination of construction and demolition and our background in aviation and some of the other things that we specialize in. We were able to sort of pick through the politics and just look at the basic facts of what happened on that morning.
All right, well, you said something intriguing there. Is there information that has not been given to the public?
I think very little, because we've had so many different people, everyone from reporters to structural engineers to professors at colleges and universities to people who've put together what are considered sort of official reports on the issue, even though they're not, government employees. I think there is actually very little that isn't, that has been held back, at least as far as the basic facts of what happened that morning in terms of the material that we looked into.
Well, I was under the impression that there were a lot of facts that were withheld. I mean...
So Davin Colburn says that there's been no information withheld from the public. Well, what about the input data on Building 7? And I don't know if that FOIA request was made at the time of this interview. This interview actually came out, I believe, right before the World Trade Center 7 final report came out. But no, that input data hasn't been released. Or how about the fact that they left out structural features from Building 7's design? They omitted them. That wasn't discovered until after this interview, in all fairness, too. But what would Mr. Davin Colburn have to say about that? Is that transparent? Is that in the interest of helping out the public understand what really happened to these buildings on that day? So they go on in this interview. They talk about some things that are outside of the AE 9/11 Truth mission. So I'm going to fast forward to them talking about Building 7.
What could that possibly hurt? Speculate.
I can't possibly speculate on evidence that I haven't seen.
All right. The only thing that is the thing I suppose that is of most interest to me,
sure,
in the series about what happened that day, the one that's the most interesting is Building 7. It may not be the most interesting, but it's the first one I turn to. And I read Popular Mechanics' response to it, in which you represent, as a little bit confusing, but you represent that there is a third of the face. You're quoting Sunder. There is a third of the face to the center and to the bottom, approximately 10 stories, about 25% of the depth of the building that was scooped out beforehand.
Right. When the North Tower collapsed, all of the debris and the wreckage from that collapse actually took a massive chunk out of World Trade Center 7. And the first time that FEMA released its initial report, that wasn't entirely clear. It wasn't known exactly how much damage that building had sustained because, obviously no plane hit that. It was, sort of standing off to the side and then eventually collapsed. And what we found through the NIST report and through talking to other experts was that, like you said, about 25% of the building's south face had been carved away from it. And World Trade Center 7 had a particularly unique construction because it was built over a Con Edison electrical substation. So when they built it up above that, the way that they aligned the steel columns made them particularly load-bearing. That's not a very good way to say it, but they were each supporting an awful lot of weight. And so when you start carving away at those, each column that you remove that was destroyed by the wreckage from the North Tower.
Well, as I describe myself, Davin, I'm an agnostic about a lot of this, and that would be very persuasive to me if it were true. And it may or may not be true. Because I look at, so I go, oh, that's interesting. If that's true, then that would go a long ways to explaining what happened to Building 7. So I turn to the pictures in your book about Building 7. You got a picture of Building 7, but it doesn't show that. So I'm going, okay, well, instead of just somebody asserting that a third of the building was scooped away, show me the picture, but you don't show me the picture.
Well, here again, there's an interesting issue that you brought up before. We have seen pictures, actually. There are pictures that are the property of the New York Police Department and other various governmental agencies that we were not given permission to disseminate. And that gets back to your original question. I cannot speak for
But
why
you got to see it. Popular Mechanics got to see them, but the average American citizen can't see them.
Correct.
Well, that's a fine kettle of fish, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is. And that, I guess, gets back to, us trying to do our homework and having the authority to see the pictures, though what we're allowed to show everyone else, what is chosen to become public domain, isn't necessarily our question.
So did you see them?
Yes.
There's do we have to kill you now?
Let's hope not.
Well, I mean, explain it to me. What did you see there that I can't see?
Actually, it was pretty much just what was described. It
must be something that would be dangerous for me as an American citizen or a voter to see.
I cannot, tell you again why
your publishers. I mean, if anybody's concerned about evidence in a criminal case or something, they've done the worst possible thing. They've showed it to a damn magazine publisher.
Right, and that was done for the purposes of our background research, so we could.
What about my background
exactly
research? What about my background research? Do you see the source of my frustration here? I didn't know we had different classes of citizens. You can't tell me it's because there's a criminal case because they've showed it to a damn magazine publisher.
I'm actually not telling you anything about
why
the information is released or not. I can't answer that question.
I know you can't.
Right?
All right, let me go to the phones.
All right, so there's Davin Colburn claiming he's seen the pictures. Well, what pictures are those? And what is this situation where popular mechanics gets to see something, but ordinary citizens cannot? Well, Davin was lying, and he has a very bad interview that follows, so you can actually see that up on YouTube. Just Google Davin Colburn, Charles Goyette, and you will see it. But can you see what we're dealing with here? I mean, Charles Goyette's frustration is shared by me, only a little muted now as we are 14 years after the event took place. Because now it's just business as usual. And, of course, Popular Mechanics did not even mention, in its republishing of that book back in 2011, did not even mention architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. They claimed that not one single structural engineer, architect, or anybody with these building expertise, I'm paraphrasing, supports these quote-unquote theories. Well, they failed to mention architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, which had been in existence for several years before. So they had plenty of time to change that in their reprinting of that book in 2011, but they did not. So this is why we got to keep on putting pressure on them, because you see what happens when you put these apologists for the official story under any kind of real scrutiny, under any kind of real pressure. They fall apart. Just ironically, their entire story falls apart just like Building 7, almost in 7 seconds, coming straight down. Symmetrically, that's what their story does. So you got to keep on applying the pressure and keep this issue relevant, because so much of what we do now in the post-9/11 world revolves around that event, revolves around this official story that has been proven false. So we got to keep the fires burning. We got to keep on doing whatever we can, even if it's a small thing, even if it's just generating content for the Facebook page. You can do it. You can use your voice, use your energy, use your skills, whatever talents you have, to bring awareness of this issue to all of the people around you. I know you can do it. I have faith. We have the activist tools available at ae911truth.org. If you need ideas, you can email me, asteele@ae911truth.org. We have the Beyond Misinformation booklet available to you. You can read it. You can take it to as many places as possible. Get the information out to as many people as possible. And just do whatever you can. Participate. That's what life is lived for. That's why we are here on this planet, to be active participants in this big drama. May you live in interesting times, as an old Chinese statement or saying goes. Well, these are interesting times, no doubt. And we have an opportunity to participate in one of the most important movements in our history as Americans, perhaps maybe even in the world. If we can overcome this, if we can get this myth exposed, if we can let people know that the official story doesn't hold water and get it acknowledged by the general public, by the government, that will be the greatest thing that any group of humans may have ever done in our entire world history. And you can be a part of that. So if you need help, go to ae911truth.org, get the materials, spread it around, do whatever you can, because the future is relying on you. All right, that's going to conclude another episode of 9/11 Freefall. Remember, this program airs every Thursday night on No Lies Radio at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. You can also download MP3s of this show from the Internet Archive by going to 911freefall.com. This is Andy Steele saying have a great week. Good luck.
9/11 Commission, which was tasked with giving us the fullest explanation? No. Not one sentence in the 571 pages of the 9/11 Commission report even mentions the destruction of World Trade Center 7. Is this one of the reasons, perhaps, that Senator Max Cleland resigns from the commission, citing it's a national scandal? The investigation is compromised. How about expert corroboration? How about Danny Jawenko, 27-year controlled demolitions expert? It starts from below. They've simply blown away the columns. It's controlled demolition. A team of experts did this. It's professional work, without a doubt. How about Hugo Bachmann, Professor Emeritus, Chairman, Department of Structural Dynamics at Earthquake Engineering, Swiss Federal Institute of Technology? In my opinion, the building, World Trade Center 7, was with great probability professionally demolished. Here's a floor plan of Building 7. Now, to bring a building smoothly, symmetrically into its own footprint without falling over, what we have to do is remove the core columns, because what we want to do is bring the outside of the building in on itself. Now, this involves a high degree of precision that fire is not capable of, being an organic process.